Welcome to Perspectives in Mobile, the news podcast from the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. Join us discussing the world of telecommunications, technology, and mobile innovations. From London, Dario Betty, MEF CEO.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Perspectives in Mobile, the podcast series from the Mobile Ecosystem Forum that looks at the people that are managing, designing, producing some of the great innovation here in our ecosystems. And we also like to think and see how they come to whatever they're doing today. But today we are going to be talking at one of the exciting area, and I'm really saying that it's really exciting for all things that are happening, which is the area of the identity questions and more, because identity opens up a lot of other things. So let's talk about AI as well as identity. So plenty of hot topics as well. And we're doing with a company that is famous with the older name of OC Labs, which is now IDVerse as well. We'll hear about that. But I'm very happy to introduce here Russ Cohn, the SVP of Go-to-Market at IDVerse. Russ, welcome to Perspectives.
Thank you, Dario. Great to be here.
Now, in my little introduction, I did say something about how exciting this is, but tell us a bit more. What is and why do you think that ID verification and any of the technologies around it are so exciting right now?
Yeah, thanks. Identity as a whole is becoming a very, very important topic, I think, for governments, for businesses, and ultimately for people. Identity seems to be the way that's connecting and allowing people to access services globally. I think as we digitize further, so technology is accelerating, we're moving to, which I'm sure you're well aware of, a mobile first, and we are in a mobile first world and increasing all the time. So people have things in their hands and they want to be able to access services and products whenever they want, and they want great experiences. Governments want to start to understand who their citizens are and allow them to access services. And businesses, of course, naturally want the best user experience and they want to understand who their customers are. And I think COVID and that whole period really showed the shortfall in businesses understanding who their customers were. They didn't have a connection, mostly, in the way they probably should have and would have. And I think identity is the pillar that's going to help drive this connectivity between all of those stakeholders as we go forward. So it's a very, very exciting time for identity. It's a very exciting time, globally. But there are things we need to be, careful about, because there's disconnection amongst the world, governments, countries, politics, and they're all getting in the way of potentially a kind of seamless connectivity stream across this using identity. So there's work to do, but the future looks very, very bright for identity.
You mentioned three different and all very important stakeholders. We heard about business, governments, we heard about consumers. Do you think that any of them right now is more important in the development of the ID technology, ID solutions, or they're all equally important?
Look, it depends where you live in the world. So, governments have different spheres of influence depending where you are, and the reaction of citizens in a particular country are in relation to the government that is providing or owning that service. So in less democratic societies, governments are more unilateral about things that need to be done, and they push it through regardless of the opinion, because it's their decision and they run the country that way, and that's entirely up to them where they do it. In more democratic communities, societies like in the UK, there's always this inclusivity, and they want to take people's sensitivities into account, and that can sometimes slow the progression of some of these things. So I think that we're a little bit behind because of getting too many opinions to do things as opposed to just driving on. I think, look, consumers are ultimately the most important thing in this whole chain. In any business you run, and you'll know this, I've learned over the years working in multiple businesses, It's always about the consumer. You have to focus on the consumer to do that. But they rely on governments and businesses to make sure that they're doing the right things in order to give them access and the kind of experience that they would want from that business. So yeah, it's a difficult one to answer, but I'd say governments have to get the regulations right and the framework in order to create this, but business will ultimately drive the commerciality and the interoperability that needs to be done from the ground up in areas where government doesn't have the kind of drive or is not as forward thinking as they should be.
Well, interesting. And we say things are changing. Some of the changes is driven by different places. IDVerse changed its name.
Yes.
Tell me a bit more what was behind that and why you felt that there was a need. Because OCR Labs, a big established name in itself, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, and it's always challenging and a bit scary when you spend time establishing yourself, your brand, your name within the market you operate in. To move, will people not know who you are? Will they understand the connection between the two? But OCR Labs is built out of a technology that we identified very early on. The founders identified as the basis for what we needed to solve. OCR is a difficult challenge technically to do, and so they started the business that way. And also, there were two young guys, they're early 20s, and they started this lab, and they had the best intention in the world. I think IDVerse represents the more of a universality around our solution. It represents more inclusiveness. Of course, it's got IDV in its name, which is identity verification, and a very key component in the core of what we do. But identity verification is broader than just one technology like OCR. And so you have to take that into account when helping to identify people, particularly with the rise of things like biometrics. And facial biometrics are the core of what we do and we see as the driver of the future. So in order to get that inclusivity, in order to move beyond just one technology, we have to have something that encompasses a much wider set of ambitions for our technology and the markets that we play in across the world. And I think it's doing that. We're standing out, and the feedback from the market has been really, really strong. And we haven't really seen an issue about who are you still OCR? Are you the same company? It's been seamless. So hats off to our marketing team, our CMO, and really the whole company for getting behind this new change and this new drive forward.
And I should probably make a note for people that, like me, were probably not very expert in some of these areas. So OCR stands for optical character
recognition. Exactly.
So before we used to look at the symbols, we were the typeface, and now you look at other symbols. What kind of things do you look at IDVerse to identify somebody, by the way?
So there are really 4 components of our automated platform solution that we give to businesses to enable identity verification to occur. The first is we look at documents, and the document that is provided. So this is normally a government issued document, which is either a passport, a driver's license, can be some sort of health card, depending on the country. If it's issued by the government, can be, an ambassadorial card. It could be an army identity document, for example. So these are all legitimate documents. What we have used is we've built, our solutions with the AI, and we're able to, and computer vision, we're able to use the phone's camera. We built software to look at the document that is presented to us and identify over 200 characteristics within a document for any country in the world. So we're talking over 220 countries, 142 languages and typesets and subscripts of that. And so we have the ability through machine learning and through computer vision to identify if that document is legitimate and intact. And that is a very important part of OCRing, is being able to know the characters in all those languages and subscripts, for example, and extract them in the correct format for where you are. So in Kanji, it's obviously different. Chinese, it's different. Portuguese, Cyrillic, Arabic, so the different typesets do make a difference, and they are a very complex problem to solve. We're able to identify those documents, not only extract that information and populate for user experience on the page, for them to verify their address and their personal details, but we're able to have inclusively those documents across the world and help people to process them. So when we look at that, we extract that, we look at the document integrity, and we do something called DFA, which is document fraud assessment. So we're checking that that document is intact. It's not a paper copy. It's not a PDF. It hasn't been altered in any way. We check that the fonts are correct, the spacing, etc. Because you might have seen, and there's a lot of fraudulent documents out there that are very easy to manufacture, very high grade, and they can pass what I call the bouncer test, which is the old days when you want to get in the club and you're like, here's my ID, right? So there are a lot of human teams that do this as well, and there's spotters, and some of them are good. But it is a difficult task when you're dealing with thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of documents from across the world every single day to be able to spot fakes and frauds within those documents and to understand what should be there versus what is presented to us. So that's a difficult challenge, and that's two aspects of our engines on the document side. When we look at the document and we finish with it, we move to what we call this face matching and biometric liveness. So we want to check not only is the person who's presenting the document the same person on the document, but they're actually live and present at the time of doing it. And that's where liveness and biometrics comes in. And so we use a number of techniques there to be able to identify proof of life, if you will. So we can check, again, using the phone's camera. So this falls really nicely into your space, how important the technology is for us to leverage and build software that's specific for these phones to be able to use the best of what we have in a compressed technology that, we know all the stories about phones today can, land the moon landing, etc. There's a huge amount of power in your hand. So you don't need hardware that's different from it, and we can leverage it and we can identify if that person is really live and if they really are the same person in the document, even if the document is old and the person has changed their features in terms of weight gain, hair loss, glasses, disfigurement to some extent. We tell the underlying structure of that person's face through the phone's technology and the solutions we built to be able to tell that that person is the same person. And by going through that process, we can identify and do the ID verification process. And this is all done in an automated fashion, all done within a 60-second or less UX, and then provide results back in a very short period of time to our businesses to say onboard that person or let them in the door, the bouncer test, or reject them or send them for further escalation, whatever the case might be in the environment you're in, whether it's a high assurance environment like banking or they're trying to rent a scooter off the street. So we have different assurance levels. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of the way we use technology in our solution.
It makes sense. And you just mentioned my follow-up question that was going to be briefly, who's going to use it right now? So you mentioned banking, you mentioned rental of services. What kind of things have been using, or what kind of businesses have been using this?
So AML, anti-money laundering, and the financial services industry was, I'd say 5 to 7 years ago, was probably 90% of use cases because there was regulation on a global level. And so you needed to do this in order to get through these processes. Now, they were slow and elongated and human-driven. They didn't have technology always to do that. Again, I refer back to the period of time a couple of years ago that we were all locked away, and businesses realized that they didn't know where their customers were. They couldn't service them in a retail environment, and they needed to be able to provide those goods and services to people regardless of where they were. So when I think about mobile growth and how far it's come and how we're getting people to move from desktop to mobile, right? And where we are today with everybody really having a mobile in their hand, really powerful technology, we see these businesses across the board, and now regulation is following as well with these frameworks that are coming out, asking people to do these services, goods and services outside of where they used to do it. So I'll be more specific. With the biggest growth that we're seeing is still financial services, but it's less of the pie. It's going more into other financial services. So obviously banks, obviously digital neobanks, etc. But now insurance companies, for example, are starting to save, and loans and pension companies. Think about wanting to access your pension securely. Think about share trading. You buy shares and you want to access that share certificate. You need to prove who you are. Now, if you do it in the old way, fax your document in or email it in, A, you've got fraud risks, and B, it takes a very long period of time. By using these techniques today, we allow access to their services. Some of the biggest growth we're seeing is on the gaming markets. So iGaming, gambling, if you will, in the old term, but it's called iGaming now. Because that market is not only growing CAGR-wise globally, because they've opened America up as well now, so that the opportunity to get new customers in is high. But gaming is getting more regulation wrapped around it, and rightly so, for underage gambling, which has to stop, and addictive gambling, which means you need to identify that person and stop bonus abuse and all the things that used to be in the fraud space for gaming. And they've realized that using identification or ID verification technology will help those problems because you can prove that that's coming up. The online safety bill in the UK, so, and this is happening in other countries as well, to protect young people from adult content, for example, is coming in. Social media is using it increasingly to prove that the people are legitimate and not bots on their Twitters. X is doing this. Facebook is looking at this across their portfolio. There's others, obviously pornography, accessing adult content, etc. So that's becoming a really big area and a big space that's growing. And then, of course, we're seeing things in like healthcare, mobility, car rentals, scooter rentals, crypto. These are all very big cases that are coming out. Health, obviously. So as I mentioned, like if you have a medical insurance, you want to make a claim or you want to access a health product. Restricted products, like in the US, buying weed online, for example. So that's a restricted or an adult. Yep. You need to be a certain age. Over here, nicotine. So the cigarette companies, the nicotine companies are moving subscription vape models online. You have to be 18 to get those as an adult for nicotine. So you have to prove who you are before I can ship you a pack of whatever vapes, right? So the use cases are proliferating at an immense rate. And that's why we're seeing more and more need with different assurance levels. Alcohol delivery, for example. If I order alcohol, these days, if you get a parcel from Amazon or anybody else, the driver is not really looking for your ID. It's like, what year are you born, right? So if I'm 17, I could just add a couple of years and they're going to give me the bottle of whatever, right? Or Deliveroo and these services. So they need that assurance to make sure that they're delivering products that are safe for the customers that they have. So that's why I say it's exciting, because it's expanding and we're seeing a much wider purview outside of the core financial services into these other necessary consumer and services and products globally.
Well, I like when you say this is exciting, and partly because you believe the .com boom or excitement, and you were looking at one of the key element of the time, which was the search engine. You were first at Miva and then at Yahoo. Do you think this is a bit of replication of those times, or is it similar? Or is it growing too fast? Is it growing, and this is going to be a big significant impact? Where are we with identification and verification?
So if I think back, and I was very lucky to be part of kind of .com 1.0, I guess, if you will, back in 2000 and that whole intersection. I worked for the inventor of paid search, which is a company called GoTo.com, which became Overture, and they were the biggest network of search engines in the world. When I joined Google in 2003 now, Overture had 85% of search market share. Nobody believes me, especially not people who are born after 1990. They have no idea about what happened and where the genesis came from. But you need competition, right? So Google created a better mousetrap in a sense. They built the click-through rate metric into what was invented by GoTo.com, which is paid search. And then they had this dynamic auction, which was able to be much more inclusive. And of course, the results became even better. So I think technology runs in cycles. You'll know from the mobile space, right? I mean, you remember the old telcos and the way they used to do it. And the telcos keep reinventing themselves. And of course, we see mergers, acquisitions. But they have to try set forward the technology that needs to be laid out, the pipes, if you will, in order to activate things like broadband, right? And where we came from dial-up to broadband, or we come from, the old mobile clunky phones or Palm Pilots, where you had something in your hand that you could use, to the mobile phone. The Sony Ericsson P800 became the new Palm Pilot. And then that evolved to the iPhone, where you could do all of that stuff and you didn't need your pencil and something else. So technology by its nature is always innovating. And the infrastructure and the companies that support that technology or technological growth are always trying to go forward and drive the change. So what I think we see in the identity space is the same thing happening, and an evolution of technology from old OCRing or even old faxing, like I said, or scanning, or emailing in, which some people still do today, in the physical form, your document, of which a human would sit and work through paperwork of thousands of applications. And your response time was weeks, if not months. we can do this now within 60 to 120 seconds. I can give you a result and pass you into a system, and you can have a bank account today because of IDV and because it enables the thing that you ultimately want to do, right? So it shouldn't be seen as a blocker. I do think AI and quantum computing is definitely we're in an inflection point that's going to change everything that we know and build an infrastructure of speed and reliability and the ability to have computing power and decisioning that is at a level that we wouldn't have seen before. And it's already happened. And that's why we use AI, Gen AI in our technology. We couldn't have, I mean, how would I get 50 million faces to train my engines to recognize them 5 years ago, 10 years ago? What would I do? I would manually crop off the internet and put them in some sort of database and then try and find a way to match them to what I'm seeing. I can train millions and millions of faces with Gen AI, synthetic faces that look like people in order to understand the diversity and complexity of people across the world to accept them into a system. The risk is the fraudsters are using the same sort of technology, if not better, to generate synthetic AI and Gen AI to put identity to people who don't even exist today into real life. And it's a real worry for us as a whole. So while it's very exciting, in answer to your question, the evolution of technology, I think it's another cycle of change. Chips are getting smaller, more powerful. NVIDIA, AMD just came out yesterday with its NVIDIA chip. This is enabling more quantum computing, more compressed power. We'll see faster phones, faster hardware, etc., even built-in hardware into ourselves to do that. But I think, we've got to have some regulation and some wrappers around this in terms of some structure, some guardrails, and some rules of engagement, because fraud will increase. It will just move from offline vectors to online vectors. And if users don't understand the difference between real and gen, and we're seeing this in the news today with all the conflicts happening, there's a lot of fake stuff out there, and people can't tell the difference, what's real and what's not. So we, together with governments, have to help build some sort of framework to identify something like, we refer to something called a nutrition label for AI. So like you walk in a supermarket and red, green, yellow, you can see there's high fat, low sugar, high salt, whatever. The AI should say, where is it made from? Is it legitimate? Is it inclusive? And is it real? And if you have that nutrition label, you can trust that AI, if you will. There's good fakes and there's bad fakes. And we create a lot of good fakes in order to stop the bad fakes. So we couldn't do that without the technology change that we're seeing. So yes, there's a lot of similarities, but we have a lot more tools in our armory now to do a lot more interesting things.
Well, I like the AI facts, little summary to be put somewhere, and I think I'll come back to you on that question. So,
absolutely, for sure.
Going back to you mentioned 10 years at Google, and Google is one of those companies that definitely everybody knows, but it has changed industries. It has revolutionized, has substituted some of the industries. Is there any parallel that you can find between Google and IDVerse, or you're culturally and fundamentally two different business and companies?
We're very different businesses. I'd love to find things. There's my time and experience at there and a number of other technology companies I've worked at, and all my experience is the accumulation of what I try to impart. There's always learnings about building businesses. And as a venture capitalist, as somebody who's worked in startups, a lot of my career, I think I try to use those foundational pieces around surrounding yourself for the right people. For example, when you hire for the right stage of growth that you're in, to help you solve problems where you are, as opposed to where you often are, want to be in a longer period of time. Because there's plumbing that has to be done when you build a business. And the challenges for each business are different. Are you a global business? Are you localized? How does your technology work? Is it packaged up? Does it need more handholding? So you'll need different kinds of people. Can you self-serve your product and never speak to a customer and they just buy SaaS? And then you have to service it afterwards. Or do you need enterprise sales to be able to have structured, deep conversations to help them move into a very complex, setup that comes with that? So yeah, I'd like to say there's similarities, but very different businesses in where we're at. We do have super smart technology founders So the similarity there, I would definitely say, is apparent. And we're at a precipice in a category that our founders have a lot of foresight and vision about, in the same way that Google. I mean, Google had a 300-year mission, right? And so that was hard to absorb. We don't quite have that size mission, but I think we know where we want to go in the next 5 to 10 years, and we want to disrupt an industry that has done things in a certain way, and we know there's a better way to do it, and we'd like to bring as many people along on that journey with us on that vision.
Russ, I probably take this from a tangent, but I start from a name. It's IDVerse, and to one other interest of yours, which is you're a board member for the Metaverse Learning Association, if I'm not mistaken. And you can find that at metaverselearning.co.uk if you're interested. Just go there. Now, why that interest? Why the learning and why Metaverse?
So I made an investment into Metaverse Learning and changed the name because I saw a technology, and I saw a technology founder who had a way of helping to bring an offline capability into a world that was growing from a technology point of view. And not only was it, again, great, like IDVerse is in the IDV space, for remote identification, they do remote learning. So you don't have to physically be present and be brought to a campus or to an area which can be costly, timely, and difficult sometimes for people to access. Metaverse learning is about educating and training people to get them ready for a skill that they need to learn and apply in a job. And as I'm sure you know, if you've tried anything new, whether it's going to the gym or doing a puzzle or crosswords or whatever, Sudoku, and there's obviously a wide range of things. We always try to challenge ourselves learning guitar. You have to practice. And what Metaverse learning does is it enables a technology using VR and AR to make you feel like you're immersed inside the environment that you will be in when you work there. And that is hugely beneficial to setting up people in this country, particularly, and globally now. We're working in many countries across the world with the ability to learn a new skill, whether you're from that industry or not, and to be able to go and work. And putting people in jobs gives them satisfaction, gives them money to be able to pay their bills, and gives them a sense of growth. And I think if we could train and enable more and more people across the world with these skills, then we live in a better world. We've got more workers who've got more skills, and we can create more economic growth from that point of view. So I love the tech, I love the vision of it, and the repurposing of an old way of learning and a physical way of actually being in a class like welding or plumbing or tiling, and being able to train for that. And then when you get there, your muscle memory is so strong that you don't make mistakes in critical situations, like when you're trying to build a nuclear reactor. If you can train 1,000 times before, you're going to know where those buttons are, right? So much better. And now it's going into things like surgery, and highly complex things like installing your charging points for people for the electric cars. If you see the shift in technology and what's driving the change, people have to reskill, or they will get left out of the workplace. So we want to help people to reskill and retrain, and enable businesses to have people that are available and skillful, and people to get jobs when their jobs become challenged. And I think that's where people need to recognize things like AI that are a threat to our jobs. You can retrain using that very technology to be better at your job or with something else. So that's why we like Metaverse Learning. The association between the two, for me, I'm a passionate tech investor, and I love technology that moves the dial, that's forward thinking, and that can help people have a better quality of life. And so ultimately, I'm doing that in hopefully all the businesses I work in. Sometimes we get it wrong, but in those two in particular, IDVerse and Metaverse Learning, I'm very excited about both of their futures.
Well, both of them sound very exciting, and something we would love to capture in its different stages of development. Things are moving faster, we're saying, by hearing ID, verification, AI, and mobile, as well as Metaverse and learning all together. There's lots to do there. And for us, there's lots to listen. So we'll come back to you. Our 30 minutes have gone.
Okay. Wow, where did that go?
Where did that come from? But I think that's probably the beginning of more conversation we're going to have with you, Russ. But for now, Thank you very much, and thanks for taking part in Perspectives.
Appreciate it. Always happy to come back and check in maybe 6-12 months time and see where we've progressed on that. But thank you for your time, Dario, and for having me on your show.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Perspectives in Mobile. Join us next as we explore telecoms, technology, and mobile innovations. Stay tuned, stay connected, and let's unlock the mobile potential together.